Plato's name is familiar even to those who have never opened his books. His ideas permeate our culture, science, politics, and even everyday speech. We talk about Platonic love, the world of ideas, philosophers in power, often without realizing that these concepts trace back to an ancient Greek thinker who lived over 2 millennia ago. But why has his teaching not only survived but continues to influence us today? To understand this, we must dive into the era in which he lived, trace his journey, and unpack the key ideas that transformed Western civilization. Plato was born around 428 BCE in Athens, a city experiencing the peak of democracy but also its crisis. Just a few years before his birth, the Peloponnesian War, 431 to 404 BCE, ended with Athens' defeat to Sparta. The city endured the tyranny of the 30 tyrants, some of whom were Plato's relatives, followed by the restoration of a democracy that was no longer the same. This historical context is crucial. From a young age, Plato witnessed political regimes rise and fall, saw how easily the masses were swayed by demagogues, and how justice was often replaced by fleeting self-interest. Perhaps these observations later led him to conclude that democracy is not the best form of government, as the crowd is incapable of wise rule. Plato, whose real name was Aristocles, with Plato meaning broad, possibly due to his sturdy build or wide forehead, came from a distinguished aristocratic family. His father, Ariston, traced his lineage to Codrus, the last king of Athens, while his mother, Pryxian, was a descendant of Solon, one of Greece's 7 sages and the architect of Athenian laws. His family envisioned a political career for him, but fate had other plans. In his youth, Plato was drawn to poetry, writing tragedies and even planning to compete in theatrical contests. But everything changed when he met Socrates. Socrates, the teacher who turned Plato's world upside down and changed his life. According to legend, young Plato overheard Socrates debating sophists in the Athenian agora. Unlike them, Socrates didn't claim to know the truth. Instead, he asked questions that forced his interlocutors to reflect. This dialectical method, the art of dialogue, captivated Plato. He burned his poetic works and became one of Socrates' most devoted students. Later, nearly all of Plato's writings would take the form of dialogues, with Socrates as the central figure. In 399 BCE, Socrates was sentenced to death on charges of corrupting the youth and impiety. This trial was both a personal and philosophical tragedy for Plato. He attended the trial and later described it in his dialogues Apology, Crito, and Phaedo. The death of his teacher convinced Plato that Athenian democracy was flawed. If the wisest man could be executed on trumped-up charges, the people were clearly incapable of distinguishing truth from falsehood. This became one of the reasons Plato later developed his theory of the philosopher-ruler. After Socrates' execution, Plato left Athens and embarked on a long journey that shaped his philosophy. In Egypt, Plato studied astronomy, geometry, and the mysteries of the local priests. He was struck by how the Egyptians preserved knowledge over millennia. Later, in his dialogue Timaeus, he wrote that the Greeks were mere children compared to the ancient wisdom of Egypt. Next, Plato traveled to Tarentum, southern Italy, where he encountered the Pythagoreans, philosophers who believed that numbers underpinned the cosmos. Their teachings on the harmony of the spheres, the mathematical structure of the universe, and the immortality of the soul profoundly influenced Plato. Particularly significant was their idea that true reality is invisible, with the physical world being merely its reflection. This later formed the foundation of his theory of ideas. Returning to Athens around 387 BCE, Plato purchased land in a grove dedicated to the hero Academus and founded his school, the Academy. It was not just a philosophical circle but the first institution of higher learning in history, where students systematically studied philosophy, dialectics, ethics, metaphysics, mathematics, geometry, number theory, astronomy, the doctrine of the harmony of the spheres, music, as an expression of mathematical laws. Above the academy's entrance hung the inscription, "Let no one ignorant of geometry enter." Plato believed that without mathematics, one could not grasp the truth. Among the academy's students were Aristotle, who studied under Plato for 20 years before founding his own school, the Lyceum; Euclid, the creator of geometry; Xenocrates, a future head of the academy. The academy endured for nearly 900 years, until it was closed by Emperor Justinian in 529 CE. The theory of ideas. A world beyond the senses. What is the world of ideas? Plato's greatest discovery was his theory of two worlds. The world of things, changeable, imperfect, accessible to the senses. The world of ideas, idoi, eternal, unchanging, comprehensible only by reason. For example, all circles in our world are imperfect, drawn ripples on water. But the idea of a circle is absolute, existing beyond time and space. The same applies to justice, beauty, and the good. They are not mere words but real entities in the world of ideas. The allegory of the cave. Why people don't see the truth. In his dialogue The Republic, Plato presents the famous allegory of the cave. People are chained in a cave, seeing only shadows on the wall. They mistake these shadows for reality. The philosopher is the one who breaks free, sees the true world in the light, and returns to tell others. But when he does, he is mocked or killed, a nod to Socrates. This myth explains not only the nature of knowledge but also the fate of any thinker who tries to change society. Political philosophy. Why philosophers should rule. In the Republic, Plato describes an ideal society where philosophers rule as only they perceive the true good. Guardians maintain order. Artisans and farmers meet material needs. Plato believed that democracy leads to tyranny because the masses are easily swayed by demagogues. His critique remains relevant today. Plato's ideas influenced Christianity. Augustine called him a Christian before Christ. Science. Copernicus and Galileo drew on his mathematical idealism. Politics. Theories of justice, utopian socialism. Plato's influence on Neoplatonism, Plotinus, Proclus, and philosophy beyond antiquity. Though Plato died in 347 BCE, his ideas didn't merely survive. They were reborn in a new movement known as Neoplatonism. This philosophical school, emerging in the 3rd century CE, not only continued Plato's traditions but radically reinterpreted them, creating a universal metaphysical system that shaped European thought from Christian theology to the Renaissance. What is Neoplatonism? Neoplatonism is a synthesis of Platonism, Aristotelianism, Stoicism, and Eastern mystical teachings. Its key features: a hierarchy of being, from the one to the material world. Emanation, outflow. The world arises not through creation but through overflow from a higher principle. Mystical experience. Union with the divine through ecstasy. Denial of evil as an independent force. Evil is merely the absence of good. Its founder was Plotinus, 204 to 270 CE. And its systematizer was Proclus, 412 to 485 CE. Plotinus developed Plato's theory of ideas into a coherent cosmic system. The One, the Good. An utterly unknowable source of all existence. Comparison to Plato, akin to the idea of the good in the Republic. The intellect, nous. The realm of eternal ideas, where thought and the object of thought are one. Linked to Plato, recalls the world of Idoi, but for Plotinus, it is a living mind, not abstract forms. The soul, the link between the intelligible and material worlds. Reference to Plato, as in Timaeus, where the demiurge animates the world. Emanation instead of creation. Unlike the Christian God, who creates the world from nothing, Plotinus one emanates being, like the sun emits light. Matter is the final stage of emanation, where divine presence nearly fades. Example from Plato. In Parmenides, Plato explores how the one relates to multiplicity, but Plotinus provides a clear answer, through descent. The soul's journey, returning to the one. The ultimate human goal is ecstatic union with the one, which Plotinus reportedly experienced personally. He called this the ascent of the mind, cf. Plato's Flight of the Soul in Phaedrus. If Plotinus was a mystic, Proclus, 412–485 CE, was a scholarly encyclopedist, transforming Neoplatonism into a complex theological system, adding new levels of being. Proclus expanded Plotinus' framework by introducing henads, divine units mediating between the one and the intellect, triads for each hypostasis, e.g., the intellect divides into being, life, and thought. Linked to Plato. This develops ideas from Parmenides, where Plato analyzes the dialectic of the one and the many. Theurgy, philosophy as magic. Proclus believed philosophers should be theurgists, performing rituals to invoke divine forces. Reference to Plato. In Phaedrus, the soul aspires to the divine, and in Timaeus, the cosmos is animated. Proclus drew a practical conclusion. Gods can be summoned. Proclus wrote extensive commentaries on Timaeus, Parmenides, and the Republic, becoming the primary transmitter of Platonism to the Middle Ages. Though Neoplatonism rivaled Christianity, Emperor Justinian closed the academy in 529 CE as pagan. It became the intellectual foundation for many theologians. Augustine reinterpreted Plotinus I as the Christian God. Pseudo-Dionysius the Areopagite drew on Proclus' ideas for Christian mysticism. Even today, when we speak of Platonic love or the ideal state, we use Plato's terms. Plato taught us a fundamental lesson. Truth lies not in opinions but in eternal ideas. As long as humanity asks questions, his philosophy will endure.